Should musicians, or any creative person for that matter, speak about political issues? Hi peaches, it's Shaaba. Welcome back to my channel and thank you for clicking on another video. It's been a little while since I've done a Thursday video. A little brain fart moment. I actually stopped making Thursday videos not because they weren't fun, I enjoy doing them, but because I wanted to carve out some more time for other creative projects, like my music. And before I get started on today's video, I would not be doing myself any favors if I didn't let you know that my new song Staying Groovy is out. Please do check it out on streaming platforms. You can find it where all music lives. Just type in Shaaba. Let me know your thoughts downstairs in the comments. It'd mean a lot if you did. And for those of you who might know my presence online but not know me for music, that means you probably know me from my podcast 1-800-DRAMA, where I, along with some guests, often my gorgeous partner Jamie, explore moral grey areas. Often it's about LGBT+ issues or POC issues, things to do with marginalised communities. There's a lot of like advocacy involved in what we do. And it's interesting to me, I don't know if you've noticed it too, but more and more in recent years, everybody, whether it be people who use social media just for the purpose of staying connected to their friends, they have like 8 followers and not in like a shady way. Their accounts are private. They don't mean to connect with other people. They just want to see what their friends are baking on a Sunday afternoon. From those kinds of people to people like me who share things online, to a curated community, to celebrities where their reach on social media can be more vast per post than the entire population of countries. For all types of people, and maybe it's because the world is just like so messed up right now. Social media is being used a lot more to share views on quite political matters. Glastonbury is the most prestigious, most well-known music festival in all of the UK, really. It has just happened. And it was, to my knowledge, the most controversial by being the most political one I've ever seen, with so many artists using their platform, using their stage presence to talk about significantly more than just music. If you're in the UK, you probably have heard about the controversial chants of Bob Vylan. We've all heard Free Free Palestine. Bob Vylan did exactly that, but they went a little step further, and without Glastonbury's knowledge, Glastonbury's actually said, we don't support what happened. The BBC are in a lot of trouble, Glastonbury's in a lot of trouble. They provided a different chant, shall we say. And between Bob Vylan and also Kneecap, who have been another group who have been very vocal about Palestine. Kneecap, by the way, who recently won a case against a very nasty politician who tried to block arts funding from them because they used their voice and platform to criticize the government. Freedom of speech, anyone? And so many other artists, gorgeous, beautiful artists. Joy Crookes, one of my favorite artists. Oh my goodness, she's amazing. Turnstile, Nadine Shah, all spoke out in support of Palestine to a wave of Palestinian flags at Glasto. Nadine actually ended her set where she showed images of Gaza now, with a then doctored image of Trump and Netanyahu drinking cocktails who I think were being served them by Keir Starmer. It was this whole thing, before playing voice notes from Palestinian children and reading an open letter signed by Artists for Palestine UK. Jade, an artist in her own right, previously from Little Mix, the angel of our dreams, led a very poetic chant of yous towards a variety of issues, to reform, to welfare cuts, to transphobia, to silencing protests. And Kate Nash, she also was very vocally critical. We're talking full-on feminist rage. She actually stated, I have a quote here, "The loudest feminist voice in the UK is currently transphobic, and that's something that I take very personally. As a feminist with trans friends in my life, dismantling systems of oppression lies at the very core of feminism, so no, transphobia is not f***ing feminist. And just because you're a f***ing millionaire and a f***ing bully with an army of trolls on the f***ing internet, I don't give a f***, mate." I mean, have you ever heard anything more British? Not just more iconic, just like more British. She then of course sang her fiercely feminist and trans ally song Jump, and her song Dickhead, saying this one goes out to Keir Starmer, JK Rowling, Rod Stewart and Nigel Farage. This is a quote, by the way. And what did Rod Stewart do? Well, Rod Stewart was also at Glasto. He supported the attention that was being brought up for the Middle East, and also brought attention to the hardships happening in Ukraine right now. But in interviews, and I don't want to misquote this, so I'm going to read it, he showed support for Farage as a new UK leader, because when he was asked about Britain's political future, he said, "It's hard for me because I'm extremely wealthy and I deserve to be, so a lot of it doesn't really touch me." He then went on to say, "But that doesn't mean that I'm out of touch. I've read about Starmer cutting off fishing in Scotland and that hasn't made him popular. We're fed up with the Tories. We've got to give Farage a chance. He's coming across well. What options have we got?" Many options, Rod, you idiot. He went on to say, "I know some of his family, I know his brother, and I quite like him." And then when asked specifically what it is that Farage stands for, except for Brexit, tighter immigration, and some very controversial economic promises, Rod said, yeah, but Starmer's all about getting us out of Brexit, and I don't know how he's going to do that. Still, the country will survive. It could be worse. We could be in the Gaza Strip. Think of that what you will. I just thought it was important to provide some framings to why Kate Nash said what Kate Nash did. And beyond specific artists, there were also just a lot of demonstrations and protests and political signage around Glasto. A very well-known protest group led by donkeys had this billboard showing Trump, Netanyahu, JK Rowling, Musk, Putin, Bezos, Farage. Why does it sound like I'm playing Glasto? Basically all queuing to board Musk's rocket. That was not meant to sound like an innuendo. And the billboard said, send them to Mars whilst we party on Earth. Like, could you get any more blunt with your message? And then you have Matt Healy, who said, you can go out into the world and there's loads of politics everywhere. We don't need more politics. We need more love and friendship. Oh, friend. Yes, that Matt Healy, who's Denise Walsh's kid, who Kate Nash also mentioned in her set. Make of Matt Healy's statement what you will. All of this to say, Glastonbury was very political, and I think it's also important to remember that Glastonbury's been political for a number of years now. Glastonbury, in its official statements and values, have supported left-wing, more liberal politics for a while. Well, like half a century. But specifically in light of what Bob Vylan said on stage, Glastonbury released a statement this year that said, with almost 4,000 performers, there will inevitably be artists and speakers whose views we don't share, and a performer's presence here shouldn't be seen as an endorsement of their opinions and beliefs. They then went on to say that Bob Vylan's chants very much crossed a line and that there's no place at Glastonbury for anti-Semitism, hate speech, or incitement to violence. And something that really caught my eye within the music sphere, the news that I'm quite passionate about keeping up to date with, was an interview that Noel Gallagher did recently. If you don't know, Noel Gallagher is from this band called Oasis. They're a very sort of well-known, super popular, back in the day band here in the UK. And he spoke recently about Glasto this year, saying that it's gotten a bit preachy and a bit woke now. Another quote for you, he said, I don't like it in music. Little f***ing idiots waving flags around and making political statements, and bands saying, isn't war terrible? Yeah, let's all boo war, f*** the Tories, man. He went on to say, it's like, look, play your f***ing tunes and get off. Donate all your money to the cause, that's it. Stop yapping about it. Let's just say, for instance, that the world is in a bit of a fucked up place. What are all the kids in the field of Glastonbury going to do about it? What is the point of virtue signaling? Perhaps unsurprisingly, he's had a lot of support from Twitter and Facebook, it seems. People saying things like, oh, he's spot on. Same goes for actors. Stick to supporting cancer and animal shelters, because apparently there seems to be a divide in, what is that person insinuating? Like the intellectual ability to support people, specifically conflict, maybe military, compared to things like animals and medical intervention. I don't quite understand. Here's another, not the greatest Oasis fan, because of course you have to like somebody's music in order to agree with their political views. You can't just be like half in, half out. It's got to be all in, you know? No hokey pokey here. Not the biggest Oasis fan, but 100% agree with Noel. Here's another, he's 100% right. The US has become like that shows too, just play the music that we have come to see. What do we think about this? And for those of you who might not know, this is the same Noel Gallagher, by the way, who on record and very fiercely endorsed Prime Minister Tony Blair, and who's also been really vocal about politics and political parties, including, and I don't necessarily disagree, condemning Labour. I'm pretty certain he was saying like, wow, how bad must Labour have been for Boris Johnson to have won? Like, that is pretty disgraceful. He's been political in the past is what I'm saying, but with his latest statement, the whole, oh, Glasto's getting too woke, what's Glasto gonna do about it? Shut up, just play your music, donate the money if you want to, why you gotta go on and on? It does encapsulate perhaps an age-old, but incredibly and increasingly maybe important question of, should celebrities or people with influence who are not politicians speak about political issues? And generally on the topic, there seems to be like two main schools of thought. Those that say, yes, in fact, if you have a platform, you have an obligation, a moral duty to use your platform and to inspire social change. And then you have the total opposing side, which is, no, shut the hell up. You don't know what you're talking about. You are a, insert the term here, musician, influencer, actor, whatever it is that Kim Kardashian is. I still don't quite know. And this question, and where I stand, sort of like in between these two schools of thought, is something that I've been thinking about for quite a long time. It is my brain fart, if you will. I do think that the media has done Noel a little bit dirty. It really made him sound like he's like, oh no one should talk about anything at all. Virtue signaling is very different to not using your platform at all. That is just a level of complexity that clearly the media cannot profit enough from, because it's not scary enough to encourage people to click. It's not juicy enough to get that ad spend. Sad, innit? But the biggest misconception to me generally is that it's an entirely new thing that celebrities are doing now because it's trendy to do so. That celebrities in the past have never used their voices for political things. It's all these woke liberal snowflakes, this new generation generation that we are raising who are going to ruin the world according to the boomers. I don't understand why people are feeling or thinking that this controversy coming from people with influence is new. Maybe it's because the likes of TikTok has like f***ed up our attention span so badly that people just genuinely forget. Maybe it's because the past hurts so much that we don't want to remember. Maybe it's because it's new to them, so they're not really like thinking about it within the wider context. But regardless of whatever it is, celebrities have been using their voices towards political issues for decades. And artists in particular, whether that be physical art mediums like Banksy to musical art mediums like Bob Marley, have consistently shown that art is inherently political. Even for the tiniest little musical worms like me, songwriting is a very vulnerable, almost compulsion. Art is often not something that people choose to do because it's fun and fluffy, but it stems from a need to express. And for people who embody any kind of marginalized characteristic, whether it be being LGBT+ or disabled or whatever it is that society is looking down at you for because you are not a cis white old rich het man. Did I cover all of the buckets? Anything where you've not had the experience of absolute privilege, art is often a commentary on how living, how identity is inherently political in nature. I don't mean to go all Sheldon Cooper, but it's because the definition of politics translates to and stems from affairs of the cities. It's about how people live. It's about our journeys. It's about our lived experiences and our viewpoints. It's relatability, which is what art is all about. It's how it connects. It's how it moves people. Having said that, I can see though that there's a very big difference between using your art to say a message and then using your platform that you've developed as an artist to specifically and actively speak out, not necessarily an art form. Advocating through art versus simply advocating. Bob Marley singing One Love is one thing, but doing interviews that advocate for the peace of the people is entirely another thing. And together they can absolutely have a huge influence on continents. Bob Marley being the most wonderful exhibit A of that. But they are separate acts, right? Or like how Kate Nash singing Germ is one thing, but then actively calling JK Rowling and Farage a dickhead is another. And I can absolutely think of instances where advocacy in both of these forms, but specifically in terms of speaking out, not just through art, has been wonderful and fantastic. We've spoken about Bob Marley, we've spoken about Kate Nash. Another example that comes to mind from very recent times is Taylor Swift with the Miss Americana documentary and all of her actions since in terms of US politics. And it clearly works. The data shows that it works. 3 organisations that provide voting resources had massive, undeniable traffic spikes of hundreds of thousands of people who were new and mostly younger voters listening when Taylor asked and urged her fans to use their democratic voices to vote. But as amazing as it is, I can also think of instances where such advocacy from people who are not politicians has also had a terrible and vast impact. And she who must not be named, JK Rowling, comes to mind. This whole video essay in itself, it's actually a video essay that I have already made with my partner. But my point is, when Taylor Swift gets people to sign up to vote and use their democratic right, yes, queen, go off. You help protect democracy. You do that. The fact that you're a musician with no evidenced qualification of being a politician in any form, oh, that doesn't matter. Who cares, right? But when JK Rowling uses her influence to encourage people to be transphobic and hateful, all of a sudden, why is a fiction author with absolutely no lived experience as a trans person and no credentialed expertise in trans issues not just listened to but also cited by lawmakers to suppress equal rights? Make that make sense. Especially when genuine medical experts like the British Medical Association are calling said laws scientifically illiterate. And they, the experts, are not being listened to. Why then? Why are we listening to artists who are not politicians in any way? What the hell? That's the brain part, right? Like, how can we endorse one and not the other? And yes, we can say that one is hateful and one is not. I get that, but that's also from my lens of being somebody who is more liberal in politics and viewpoints and cares about people who are marginalized. And sadly, not everybody is like that. I would much rather live in a world where freedom of speech exists and freedom of thought exists and freedom of expression exists, where people can have their separate views, because autonomy is very important, because we can't force people to all think one way. Now, hear me out, whilst I'm not at all saying that, you know, I wouldn't eradicate hate speech if I could, if I had the chance. But my point is, I can say that it's hate speech and that I would rather everybody be this way. But if the people in power were like, oh no, everyone needs to be this way, that would be really problematic. So really what we're talking about is not forcing people to all think the same way. It's allowing people to have autonomy and live living in a world where people would want and actively choose to do things that don't harm others. Doesn't that sound lovely? But personally for me, I do see some major differences between what Taylor Swift has done and what JK Rowling's been doing, right? Firstly, Taylor Swift is talking about an issue that directly affects her, like meaningfully, genuinely, authentically, not under the guise of feminism, truly affects her. As an American, as a voter, as somebody who is part of that younger demographic where there is a noticeable gap in voting, this is an issue that Taylor has lived experience to be able to speak on, whereas JK Rowling is not a trans person, has no credentials in any peer-reviewed trans research, and what she's advocating for affects a community that she is in no way a part of, or at least not publicly, under the guise of saying that it affects cis women in a way that helps them when it absolutely does not. And that's not to say that Taylor Swift hasn't acted in ways where her personal bias has shown. For example, she's been very vocal about endorsing left-leaning governments, and equally as vocal about berating Trump, but again, these are issues that directly affect her. The second major difference that I see here as well is that what Taylor Swift is sharing are things that are in her advocacy factually correct, and where any personal bias is not changing the accuracy of the message that is being pushed out. Like when she was like, hey Trump, stop doctoring my image to make it seem like I support you. I don't. That's not a personal view that's being used to twist any fact. It's just fact. Or like when she shared on her Insta story that, hey, you should totally sign up to vote, and you should vote for the people that represent you, for the things that matter to you. By the way, here is how you do that. That is just factual information. It's not changing or affecting the autonomy of other people. In fact, it's encouraging people to have accessibility to their rights. The third major difference which I see between these two instances is one where my personal bias absolutely shows, and that's where deep down I know one to be discriminatory and to be advocating for something that isn't good versus advocating for something that I truly think is really important, which is everybody having a voice and being able to use that voice to acknowledge that what we see as bad and good can really vary depending on your own personal values. And as I said before, I certainly don't think there should be any way a system where we can only speak out or advocate if it's something, you know, that the majority think is good, that it fits one specific viewpoint only, because freedom of speech is really important. But having said that, freedom of speech is not freedom of consequence. And that is a very important thing to keep in mind. You can say what you want to say, but if saying what you want to say is removing the rights for other people, is lying about people and making other people be scapegoated and villainized based on things that are just not true, that is not okay. Those are the differences that I can see. If you can think of any other differences that can help create this sort of principle rule and untangle this brain fart as to why some seem okay and others seem not okay, I'd be really interested in hearing that. Get your fuzzy butts downstairs, let's have a conversation. Just remember to be kind. But regardless of whether or not we agree with a certain celebrity's stance or not, I can see problems across the board with that impact, whether it be JK Rowling or Taylor Swift, whether it be something that we also agree with and fundamentally want to see being fought for and spoken about or not. And this is the real sort of meaty part of my brain fart. God, that sounds so gross. The first issue that's swirling around my mind is asking, is that impact that comes from a celebrity actually meaningful? Like, is it actually doing what we want it to do? What that celebrity wants it to do? Like, yes, Taylor Swift got a bunch of people, waves and waves of people to vote, to sign up to vote. But hear me out. Are those people who have signed up because Taylor Swift has told them to sign up to vote, then signing up to vote for the right reasons? Are they voting in a fully informed way that makes sense to them? And are they doing what they're doing because it's important to them? And will it actually get results on like a long-term basis where that person then ends up being a fully integrated and actively willing to contribute democratic member of society? Or are they just doing it because their favorite celeb, oh my god, Taylor Swift told me to do that and I'm like such a big Swiftie, so like, yeah, I'll vote. I mean, yes, regardless of the reason, it is good that hundreds of thousands of more people are now signed up to vote, but only if they are then using that, right, exercising their right to democracy. It would not be good news, dude, if people were voting, hundreds of thousands of people were voting in one specific way because a celebrity told them to. That's not democracy. That's the total opposite of democracy. It's manipulation and it's coercion tied with a pretty bow on it. And you could be like, yeah, Shaaba, but in other instances it works. Like, shut up. If someone can raise hundreds of thousands to millions of pounds towards a good cause, does it really matter if the people contributing and donating actually believe in that cause? Do they have to believe and be invested in the cause beyond being invested in the person that's asking them for the money in the first place? £1 million towards saving hunger is still £1 million towards saving hunger, regardless of whether that £1 million is being donated by people who want to tackle world hunger or people who just want to show that they love Taylor Swift. Sure, I get it. But then if that reason ends up then not being a good reason, and the person who has influence is then doing it for an objectively bad reason, say this all of a sudden becomes £1 million not towards eradicating world hunger, but towards a very insidious, sad, horrible issue. But people are then doing it because they like the person doing it. Like, do we still like the fact that that money can be saved? Do we still say, oh yeah, you don't need to support the cause, you just need to support the person? What I will say on this point though is that the answer to that is not no, we shouldn't be allowing people with platforms who are not politicians to be talking about social issues. It's more, oh my gosh, shouldn't we be tackling the fact that society can't really think for themselves, and we've developed like this weird idolizing culture in what is quite possibly the biggest damage in our society, where we have overwhelming amounts of information thrown at us and no want or tools to even understand how the information that we're being given is valid, is verifiable, and is not just a pile of shit. Maybe a pile of shit is like really harsh, but even just like in some ways contributing towards something that isn't actually very good. I'll give you an example. You're probably gonna think this is really controversial. Maybe this is gonna be seen as a hot take. We're gonna go there. Know that I'm doing it from a place of good. I think I'm trying. I present to you Band-Aid, not the plaster, the celebrity charity supergroup Band-Aid, made in the 80s by Bob Geldof and made to raise money specifically for anti-famine efforts in Africa. Everybody seems to know the song. Do they know it's Christmas time at all? It's like the biggest thing that's played in every friggin' store you go to. Greg's is there. Clothes shops, it's there. Gavin and Stacey, it's there. And from what I've been able to find to date, they've raised £150 million for famine relief. Amazing, right? How could that be bad, Shaaba? Why are you trying to darken my bubble? Bear with me. You'll see where it's going. You can make your own mind up. I'm not sure where I stand. If I'm being perfectly honest, that's what these brain fart videos are all about. In recent editions of Band-Aid, we've had huge names. I mean, I'm sure those names were also big in the 80s, but names that resonate more with the current most biggest demographic groups that consume music. We've got Ed Sheeran, we've got Rita Ora, we got Sam Smith, we got One Direction, we got Coldplay, you name it. But last year, when Band-Aid reused Ed Sheeran's vocals in particular for their 40th anniversary of Do They Know It's Christmas Time at All, Ed Sheeran said, I really wish that they'd asked for permission, and if they had, I probably would have said no. I would have respectfully declined, because in the years since taking part, he's listened to African artists like Fuse ODG who have actively turned down invitations to partake in Band-Aid. And why? Fuse quotes, I'm going to read this out so I don't get it wrong, while they may generate sympathy and donations, they perpetuate damaging stereotypes that stifle Africa's economic growth, tourist and investment, ultimately costing the continent trillions and destroying its dignity, pride and identity. Essentially, what Fuse is saying is whilst Band-Aid's efforts are coming from a really well-meaning place, this ingrained image of do they know it's Christmas enshrines the idea, immortalizes the idea that Africa is plagued with famine and poverty. And it's simply not true. But what it does mean is when a continent has that kind of reputation that's really hard to shake off, it often means that they're not able to take pride, or they're not believed, they're not legitimized in their pride of their development, which is an issue that a lot of the BRICS economies have. And it's a really damaging perception that the West not only doesn't try to refute, but actively continues to contribute to in order to stay on top. And so Africa, alongside the other BRICS economies, don't get as much tourism. People don't think, oh, what beautiful paradise-feeling areas. Look at that gorgeous sun, sea, sand. No, they just go, do they know it's Christmas time? It's poor. That's not somewhere that I want a holiday. Or if they do, it's all go, but it's dangerous. Be careful, us and them. It's very those vibes. And it's not just about tourism. It's also about wider corporate investment. A lot of investors feel with a huge level of unconscious, but also conscious bias that they can trust Western activities and projects significantly more than the BRICS economies. And be honest, like, what do you think of when you think of Africa? What comes to mind? Are you thinking of the starving children that we see in the ads, in comic relief ads, in Band-Aid-esque ads? Because if I'm being really honest to myself, you know what's not coming to mind? Nairobi's wealth and skyscrapers and nightlife and corporate direct connection and international transport. Like, that's not what's coming to mind. And that in turn then feeds into a wider issue of racism, where people then call out initiatives like Band-Aid for feeding into the portrayal of Africa being this super barren land that needs rescuing by Western intervention, without the acknowledgement that it's a problem undeniably contributed to by Western colonialism in the first place. Indrajit in 2023 said that actually this initiative like Band-Aid is a really ignorant and colonial attitude that's significantly more about making white people feel good than it is about helping anyone. Ooh. Has this made you sad? I don't want to make you sad. That's not the purpose of the video. I'm not saying don't listen to the song. I'm not saying don't think that Band-Aid is coming from a good place. I'm not saying they're an enemy. I'm not saying that Band-Aid is inherently bad. I'm saying it's bloody complicated, and we need to be able to put these sort of like egos to one side, to have these collaborative conversations to understand the best way to move forward without historical harm being repeated and repeated and repeated. As Fuse rightly points out, Band-Aid is not the problem. Racism is the problem. But it is true that Band-Aid's actions, even to this day, feed into that machine. When asked about this, Bob Geldof defended Band-Aid and his actions, and he said that he's been doing a lot more than just having a little sing-along with his little pop star friends. I don't know why I'm assuming they're doing this. Bob's been talking at global summits. He sat with Kofi Annan on Kofi's Africa Progress panel, I think for like 12 years, and not with singers or superstars, but with politicians, with secretaries, with members of the IMF. And of course we don't hear about those things because why does the news want to cover such non-juicy topics? That doesn't give them coin. And Bob says when these initiatives were not getting investment, he was the one that raised an additional 200 million. He was the one that brought in trade unions' rights. He was the one that employed 11,000 people, etc., etc. It's very impressive. And I see that, and I see that as being a good thing. But I also see the further point of why did you, the white man, need to raise that investment fund in the first place? Where you, Bob, and you, Fuse, both want to see Africa stand on its own, it currently isn't, because white colonialism stops Africa from being able to raise their own investment, causing you to then sweep in as a little superhero that again is coming to save the day, and again stopping Africa from doing it on its own. And look, if I haven't said it enough, if the point has not come through enough, it is a really complex issue. Bob is right that of the 600 million people starving around the world right now, 300 million of them are in Africa. And over the course of, 40 years, the only reason that hundreds of thousands of African communities are alive right now is because of what Bob refers to as this little pop song. And Bob acknowledges that this is a ridiculous way to run the world, and it absolutely should stop. But while it doesn't, Band-Aid is a life-saving resource. And at the same time, Fuse is absolutely right in saying that there needs to be an acknowledgement and an accountability. That this is a problem that white society has caused. And that if Western society continues to try and save Africa, come in and act as that superhero that saves this helpless, quote-unquote, helpless continent, without changing the narrative to making this seem like more of a partnership than it is like a very different power dynamic. As Fuse says, solidarity, not charity. And things could get a lot better. Properly, genuinely, a lot better. And the three big issues that really stem from this is one, because it's massively complex, despite the fact that it can have a fix, the nostalgia of a song that people just love to belt out at Christmas time means that it's not actually being fixed because people are not actually listening. And why aren't they listening? Because when people don't care about the issues, they only care about the celebrities that front the issues, they are not genuinely invested in a way for meaningful change to occur. They don't care enough to have this deeper understanding, to look into this deeper understanding, which actually makes longer standing change, which requires systematic disruption where that current system is based on white supremacy. And you know, if Rita Ora and Sam Smith and One Direction spoke about it, like to this level of complexity, people won't give a shit. It's why, just like when Miley Cyrus is talking about her album, talking about her art and the meaningful steps that she's trying to take, her own fans are heckling her to sing her Hannah Montana song. And it wasn't that kind of event. It's because we have some kind of fucked up culture, right? Where celebrities are both idolized but also made to be these little performing monkeys, where they're allowed to have just a little bit of spice, a little tiny bit of Nando's peri-peri to make them edgy, to make them palatably problematic. Or what's that? Or Olivia Rodrigo gives out some pro-choice merch at concerts. Edgy. Wait, what's that? Chapel Rowan is talking about about gay rights and demanding that she have boundaries in respect to the paparazzi? No. How dare she? We must villainize her. And you know what? We never liked her anyway. it's very that. Oh, what's that now? Taylor Swift, our country singer, wrote a song where she's dressed as a man to talk about feminism. How edgy. But hey, as long as she still remains pretty and sparkly. And what's this? Now she's condemning our president. Oh, what a silly little girl. All she does is dance on a stage. What does she know? And by the way, why hasn't she had babies yet? The second big issue comes from guilt. And again, that is absolutely stemming from this concept of white supremacy. As Michaela Loach says in her book, It's Not That Radical, which is a really wonderful read. I highly recommend it. All of our world's biggest problems are connected through this idea of supremacy. From climate change to racism to what Wakanda is trying to represent. And as I said before, and I'll say it again, genuine change is not going to come from within a system. It's going to have to disrupt the system. It's going to have to break the system. And in order to dismantle that, because it doesn't have to be in a hostile or horrible way, there needs to first be acceptance. But for there to be acceptance, white society as a whole needs to feel guilt. And it's not easy to do that, especially when it's historical guilt. Because that conversation very quickly turns into, oh, well, I'm not racist. Not at all realizing that contributing towards a white supremacist system doesn't need to mean that you hate people of color. It just needs to recognize that white people in general can only experience the privilege that they experience today off the backs of people of color who historically have suffered because of people who are genuinely racist then. And that beyond white people, but just Western society, which includes people like me who grew up in Western culture, and other people who also grew up in the privileges of Western society, can only experience the privileges that we experience off the back of non-Western society. And we have seen time and time again how much white people and Western society just hates to hear that. Because the big powers that be, the fat cats, white CEO men, the 1% who don't want you to hear that, know that if you do understand that, they will lose all of their power the second that the 99% of the rest of the world realize that they can band together to dismantle this existing system in order to build a better and equitable one that benefits everybody, not just these people, an insanely disproportionate amount. And so they doctor an environment where white people are just really scared of feeling that guilt. So when people like Monroe Bergdorf speak a very complex truth, she's then scapegoated for attacking white people. And it is this exact system that will instill a level of guilt in people like Bob Geldof. So when people like Fuse go, hey babe, do you reckon we can maybe like change this narrative? You know, solidarity instead of charity? Bob then feels the need to go, hey, look, I'm helping. Look at everything that I've done. I'm clearly contributing towards the solution. I'm not the problem. And if people then say, sure, I see that, and it's great that you're helping now, but the whole, you know, wouldn't you rather teach a man to fish than give them a fish? You know, that analogy, wouldn't it be better if we could create this world in which Africa could save itself instead of white people having to come in and save Africa by doing the fundraising that you're doing? And for that, Western dominancy kind of needs to end. So pretty please, could you, lovely Bob, just reframe this super historical song that preaches white saviorship to instead say solidarity and partnership, please? Bob knows that society is going to hate that, because that would mean having to accept that belting a super beloved song that gives people the sense of feel good around Christmas, like, oh yeah, we're doing something fantastic. We're thinking about those starving kids in Africa. See that feeling that makes everybody feel good to then continue having that privilege, even if it's on an unconscious level, that would then need to be acknowledged as being complicit in something wrong. Something that reminds us that historically we've caused a problem that we're only now pretending to fix, or that we're fixing on a real temporary basis by continuing to be white saviors in a system that is doctored to never allow others to save themselves. And then that new song with the different lyrics will flop, and the media will spin the narrative because coin, and because people don't care about the actual issue, they just care about the celebrity, which brings me to my third massive issue, and that is evil capitalism and corrupt media. And I genuinely do not know how to fix this, because this is a beast that feeds itself. But you know that if Bob and Midge decided to rewrite the song in the way that Fuse is talking about, the media would have a field day. Oh, our beloved Band-Aid song ruined, made woke, trying to frame white people as their problem, when look at us, white people should feel proud, raising hundreds hundreds of millions for them. Ungrateful non-Westerners. That is exactly what it would be. Reinforcing the problem, right? Reinforcing and making even wider that divide of us versus them, and absolutely not taking any accountability that this was an issue that Western society created in the first place. And the media has already skewed and biased this issue, specifically in relation to Band-Aid. Look at some of these headlines. I'm Team Geldof in his beef with Ed Sheeran. Geldof responds to the Band-Aid criticism as Ed Sheeran slams reboot. Geldof insists this little pop song has saved millions of lives. None of this centered the issues of Ebola, of helping Africa hold pride in its true narrative as an incredible and powerful nation. No, it's all about celebrity beef. And why? Because people don't care about the issues, they only care about celebrities. You want to see further proof of them not caring? Here's a little screenshot that I took of all of the news results of Fuse talking about the issue. Where Fuse is the original artist who is African and spoke about this, there were 10 news results. And only 2 of these gave Fuse the recognition of his name being used in the title of the article. All the others just center around Ed Sheeran and Bob Geldof. But now here is the screenshot results for the news search for Ed Sheeran. Everything else exactly the same, but Ed Sheeran. For Swap and Fuse for Ed Sheeran, who in his post literally signposted to Fuse and said, listen to Fuse. There are hundreds of results across multiple pages. This shows that the emphasis from the media is not about the issue, when it really could be, and when it really could be helping to repair the misconception of Africa that even Bob acknowledges exists. But no, we need to make it sound like Bob and Ed are no longer besties, boo-hoo, because that's what people care about. Why? Because that's what the media tells people to care about. Why? Because that's what the 1% who run the media and pay the media tell the people to care about. Why? Because that is the system, and lo and behold, the exact same thing is happening to Glastonbury this year. All of these artists are coming out. They are being very brave and very strong and using their platform, risking their careers, risking their reputations to talk about social issues that really matter, like war, like trans rights, like marginalized rights generally, about resisting an alt-right government that doesn't serve society fairly. But no, all of the news headlines are Bob Vylan no longer allowed to play Manchester Festival, Bob Vylan's been dropped by agents, Kneecap leads chance, Kate Nash launches a sweary attack. They aren't talking. They aren't getting society to talk about the causes that these celebs are talking about. They're only talking about the artists themselves. A fact that Bob Vylan themselves have pointed out. They said, today, a good many people would have you believe that a punk band is the #1 threat to world peace. Last week it was a Palestine pressure group. The week before, another band. And we are not the story. We are a distraction from the story. And any sanctions received will also be a distraction. The more time they talk about Bob Vylan, the less time they spend answering other questions. The final point that comes to mind about celebs talking about social issues, or anyone using their platforms for that matter, is the pressure to do so nowadays. And that doesn't just apply to celebrities, it applies to every single one of us. The pressure to speak out, the pressure to post the black square. This term virtue signaling is one that we hear quite a lot, and it's one that Noel used in a way that didn't seem like entirely correct to me, or maybe it wasn't that Noel used it incorrectly, but the media then took that out of context incorrectly. But virtue signaling as a term means expressing a stance that aligns with popular moral values with the intent of showing good character, and is often used as a bad thing, to suggest that someone is more concerned with appearing virtuous than actually supporting the causes that they're talking about. And this can be individuals as well as companies. It can be your bestie from school with 7 followers on Instagram to the biggest celebrity with tens of millions of followers. And I've referenced the black square because that is the prime example to me of virtue signaling. Back when it was a trendy thing to do, because actual societal conversations were happening, because people were outraged at tragedy. And the effect of that was people judging other people for not posting a black square. Those conversations really quickly turned into, oh, hey, did you see so-and-so didn't post a black square? As opposed to, hey, isn't racism terrible? And isn't it quite ridiculous that we as a society have taken this long and needed this level of tragedy for the world to be fixing it? And more importantly, like, how do we fix that? Another huge example, which is aptly happening kind of right now as Pride Month has come to an end, is the number of companies that show rainbow logos. They unashamedly paint all of their stuff, all of their socials, some of their products in rainbows, but then don't actually meaningfully do anything to strive for LGBT plus equality in what is quite possibly one of the scariest time in our lifetimes for our trans siblings to exist right now. I do think it's really common and increasingly common now to expect celebrities or anyone with a little bit of influence influence to speak up about issues. And honestly, I can see it from both sides, where that's a good thing and a bad thing. I can see the use in the States, for example, is still so shunned to be concerned about Gaza, with more people talking about it, specifically celebrities. Even more people still beyond that ripple effect are then feeling empowered to be able to talk about it themselves. And it certainly has had a snowball effect where governments are at least acknowledging and observing that many people are very, very unhappy. Are people doing it because they feel a need to do it or because it's the new trendy thing to do? Does it make a difference at the end of the day? Does that difference of societal discourse then actually make a change to what governments are doing? I'm shrugging a lot right now. The downside is, again, that things are being entirely derailed. Conversations are being entirely derailed and used to distract from the issues at hand. Glastonbury being Exhibit A. And I think the second downside to this too is that we then have so many people who, through this pressure and expectation of being forced, demanded, relentlessly requested to talk about certain issues, they can then end up doing more harm than good by talking about things that they don't really know or understand. We saw this a lot with creators. That's a field that I'm sort of very comfortable and familiar with, which is why I'm talking about it now and using that as a reference. When creators were being blacklisted about not talking up about the Middle East. And we see it all the time, even still now, with any celebrity stance, regardless of what the interview seems to be about. Someone's asked about their position on a trans person. One of the saddest examples that I can probably give, which made me lose a lot of faith in humanity, was Graham Norton. When he was asked about his stance on trans people, and his response was basically, ask trans people. Like, why are you asking me? You should be platforming trans voices right now. And he was heckled off of social media. He literally deleted his Twitter because of how much bullying he got for saying, listen to trans people about trans things. But it is kind of crazy that that person, that celebrity name is the topic of news, even when what they're saying is that they don't want to be. And that is definitely something that we see in the creator sphere all of the time. I personally have been quite vocal about Palestine across my socials. And even so, the amount of people and comments that I've had, like demanding that I speak up, being like, I haven't seen you say anything. And to not just speak up about Palestine, but to speak up about literally so many things happening in the world. And whilst this is absolutely not the main takeaway point that should be taken from this, I do want to acknowledge that for many creators, it is a lose-lose situation to do so, where people either feel forced to talk about things that they really don't understand, that can absolutely end up causing more harm than good in a situation because they then end up spouting crap that they don't know what they're talking about, that other people then believe, because we're in a society where people don't really fact check, or where their teams, specifically if they're like really large creators, end up manipulating the opportunity as a wonderful point of free PR to get them to say things that they don't really understand, which is then uninformed because it's serving an inauthentic purpose. Or they're told off for not saying anything at all. And then them not saying anything is what dominates societal conversation, because society is far more interested, because the media is far more interested in potential controversy of a popular name, more so than actually platforming the important issue at hand. Or then they do say something and the conversation is all about them, not the important issue. And again, to clarify, I'm not at all saying that talking about war, that talking about trans rights, that talking about anything important is a bad thing. But it certainly isn't a good thing when we live in a system where our biggest news outlets are not actually interested in the thing, but they're just wanting the next big scoop on who they can cancel, looking for people who have controversial views, because for them, that means dollar at the expense of the insert marginalized group here that are then being so villainized and so harmed by that very negative representation. And we're seeing the exact same thing happen right now in terms of immigration, where identities of huge hordes of people end up being put in these two camps by this increasingly widening culture war of, oh my god, immigrants are such villains, or oh my god, immigrants are such heroes, when I'm pretty certain, regardless of their immigration identity, they just want to live like all other people. They just simply wish to exist without being the headline of your dramatic news. I do think that my viewpoint is that I don't think artists speaking out is at all a negative thing. The bitterness for me definitely comes from when platforms are used in a manipulative way to project expertise, or for media narratives to twist it and sensationalize what's happening, and then to see that people actually don't give a shit beyond that celebrity label. And I do think we do need to keep in mind that although this is a conversation that's been happening for a really long time, and celebrities have taken this space in politics for a really long long time, the compounding effect of that is really changing our political structure in ways that we haven't really seen before. This list that I'm showing you on screen, is the number of politicians who used to be actors, models, singers, just someone in the public eye. The very own US president right now is also suggested in peer-reviewed research to only have the power and the influence that he does have because in part the parasocial relationships that have contributed towards that come from his celebrity status from being on shows like The Apprentice. And when we have people like Boris Johnson who has a book out and Matt Hancock who was just on I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here, one of the biggest reality TV series in the UK for sure, for our sins, I really think that we are witnessing as a society the biggest conflation that we ever have before of celebrity status and image and popularity with politics. And we really need to get our act together. Woo! Media has absolutely made us lose sight of reality, and whether you love or hate certain celebrities, I do think that that stage is one of the most successful ways that we have to actually get people talking and listening again. It's just all about whether people are willing to hear it. And that concludes my brain fart. Before I go today, I'll leave you with one act of true allyship, true social issues that made me really happy to see recently that I wanted to share with you, and that's about the singer Adele. Adele was recently asked by the UAE to perform a private concert, and reports have suggested that she was approached with a very pretty fee of $20 million in order to do this show, and it was specifically for a high profile and ultra exclusive guest list. And Adele was asked to perform with one condition, and that is that she was not allowed any expression of LGBT plus support. No flags, no references, no statements big or small. And Adele's response was, if I can't bring all of me, then I'm not coming at all. The people I sing for and who made me who I am are not up for negotiation. There's absolutely no virtue signaling there. Instead, a genuine act of true allyship with her whole chest. And am I maybe being part of the problem by glorifying Adele here instead of using this opportunity to be like, hey, and LGBT plus issues, that's a real problem. That's a real threatened community right now. I also feel like I do that too, but do keep that in mind. Alright, my loves, I feel like this has been a heavy one. It's been ages since I've done a brain fart video. I hope that this is something that you could follow along with, that you in some way took something from and felt, I don't know, that it was a useful use of your time to be watching it. Congratulations. That's very impressive if you made it this far. I think my biggest takeaway from this, and something that I wholeheartedly encourage you to do, is to think for yourself and to be as fully informed as you can on the issues that you hear. I'd love to know your thoughts. Until next time, whether it be through a song or through a 1-800-DRAMA episode, I look forward to catching you in another video. For now, be kind and have a great day. Bye.